Okay, so what I wanted to show you is the setup with the Manjimup Pasture Group perennial pastures establishment with grazing cereals. So this is a Duncan renovated drill, quite a common drill in the southwest or where there's smaller areas. And it's a 6-inch machine, and what we did was actually apply different types of application of perennials and grazing cereals. So some in the same row, some with a skip row, and some deeper than others. So what we did with the tines, obviously with these machines you have some of the tines as we go a bit lower here. So this is a simple tine system here. Normally this machine would have a press wheel sitting behind it, and this is the front tube here is the fertiliser, which would go deep, and normally the back tube is the seed, which would go shallow. But even that is too deep for perennials. So what we did to actually establish shallow perennials, and this is an idea of Rob Rex's from Wagen up the river, is that we would take that tube out and we cable tied it, pretty high tech, cable tied it to the back of the tine, and then that would drop the actual seed virtually on the surface, which we know with perennials you need to be about 1 centimetre. So what was happening as it moves, the dirt flows in behind the tine, and there's a slight covering of the perennial, and then the press wheel would come straight behind this and push it into the centimetre depth. If we were to go down the tube with the perennial seed, the issue with that is that it would be too deep, and when soil falls in, it would actually make the perennials too deep. So that was probably the high-tech part of the trial in terms of how we would get the placement of the seed exactly where we wanted it. And we know with perennials that if you want to get the best establishment, it needs to be shallow enough. The challenge with cereals in doing that is that cereals need to be a bit deeper because they're a bigger seed. So the challenge with this machine was to put the cereals, which was wheat, at about 2 centimetres, and then the perennials on the surface of that, which was at 1 centimetre. So that's how we did that program. One of the challenges with this machine with 6 inches is that your speed is quite important, because the faster you go, the more dirt you throw. So you can be throwing from one row to the other and making one row deeper than the other, depending whether the tine's at the front of the machine or the back. So we actually established the trial at quite low speed rates. We're only about 6 kilometres an hour, which for a lot of farmers is not fast enough. But the way you could handle that is to actually widen your spacings, but then you would reduce the density of the perennial. So there's some pros and cons of all of this, but we think we've been able to establish the trial with a range of different establishment techniques. So some deep cereals and shallow perennials. One row having the cereal and the inter row having the perennial. The next row having the perennial. So that was what we called the skip row. And all we did there was actually blocked off the tube so that the perennials went every second. We can block it up in this machine. So every second row there was the perennials, and every other row was the cereals. So that's how we set up the trial, and as a result, towards the end of the 3 years, I mean, the results were fairly close. The perennials on their own, in the end, showed that they were just as effective as establishing grazing cereals with the perennials in the first year. So even though the perennials on their own in the first year had a loss of grazing because they were so slow and you couldn't graze them because you would pull them out, in the second and third years they really came into their own. So the challenge with grazing cereals and having that as a part of a cover cropping, I guess, with the perennials, is that they rob moisture and nutrients from the perennials as well. So while you might get a good cereal yield, the perennials were establishing okay, but then their longevity into years 2 and 3 were starting to decline. So very interesting trial and some good results.